For decades, King Charles has carried a burden of secrets, but now the truth can no longer stay hidden. From forbidden love affairs to a royal marriage doomed from the start, the shocking reality behind his life is far darker than the public ever imagined. What really happened between Charles and Diana? What secrets did the royal family try to bury? And could this latest revelation change the monarchy forever? Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear will change everything. The Loneliest Prince, a childhood in the shadows. Being born into royalty might sound like a fairy tale, but for young Charles it was anything but. From the moment he entered the world on November 14, 1948, his life was dictated by strict royal protocols, distant parenting, and an unrelenting public gaze. His mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had just ascended to the throne when Charles was still a toddler, leaving little room for traditional maternal affection. Instead of warm embraces and bedtime stories, Charles was raised by a revolving door of nannies, tutors, and royal aides who were instructed to shape him into the perfect heir. Unlike other children who could run freely in their backyards, Charles was trained to sit properly, speak formally, and behave as though he were already king. His father, Prince Philip, had a very different vision for his son's upbringing. A former naval officer, Philip believed in discipline, toughness, and emotional restraint, qualities he felt were essential for a future ruler. But Charles was nothing like his father. Sensitive, introverted, and artistic, he struggled to meet Philip's expectations. The Duke of Edinburgh often mocked his son for being soft, pushing him into physically demanding activities to toughen him up. Instead of finding encouragement at home, Charles was met with criticism. His natural inclination toward poetry, philosophy, and the arts was dismissed as weakness, reinforcing the deep-seated loneliness he carried throughout his childhood. Making matters worse, the media followed his every move. As the firstborn son of the Queen, Charles's upbringing was a national spectacle. Every time he stepped out in public, cameras clicked, journalists scribbled, and the world analyzed his expressions, words, and actions. Unlike his younger siblings who had more privacy, Charles had no escape from the royal microscope. If he appeared too serious, he was labeled uncharismatic. If he seemed too playful, he was accused of not taking his future role seriously. No matter what he did, he was constantly judged. Despite the challenges of his early years, Charles learned to mask his emotions. He mastered the art of presenting a poised, dutiful image to the world, even when he felt completely isolated. He longed for a sense of normalcy, something that would become even more difficult when he was sent away to one of the most brutal schools in Britain. Little did he know, his childhood struggles were just beginning. The brutal years at Gordonston, the school that broke him. When Charles was just 8 years old, his father decided that he would attend Gordonston, a remote boarding school in Scotland known for its harsh discipline and demanding physical training. Prince Philip had attended the same school and thrived under its strict rules, believing it had made him resilient and independent. But for Charles, Gordonston was a nightmare. The school prided itself on toughening up young boys, stripping them of any privilege and forcing them to endure grueling routines. The days started at dawn with icy showers, morning runs in freezing temperatures, and intense physical drills. The philosophy was simple: hardship built character. But for a sensitive and reserved child like Charles, the experience was traumatizing. He wasn't athletic, nor did he enjoy the outdoors the way his father had. Instead, he preferred reading, painting, and playing the cello, none of which held much value at Gordonston. The other boys sensed his weakness and bullied him mercilessly. They saw him as soft, pampered, and out of place. While most students found ways to cope with the school's harsh conditions, Charles suffered in silence. In letters to the Queen Mother, Charles described his misery, calling Gordonston a prison sentence and Colditz in kilts, referencing the notorious German prisoner of war camp. He wrote about how he was teased relentlessly, how he spent nights crying into his pillow, and how he dreaded waking up each morning to face another day of torment. Yet, despite his pleas to be sent elsewhere, his parents insisted he endure the hardship. They believed it would make him stronger. Although Charles eventually adapted to Gordonston's rigorous lifestyle, The experience left lasting emotional scars. It reinforced the idea that he had to suppress his true self in order to meet expectations. The school may have toughened him up in some ways, but it also deepened his insecurities. He left Gordonstown with a quiet determination to prove himself, not through brute strength, but by embracing his own identity. But before he could truly find himself, his life would take an unexpected turn. The woman he truly loved was about to enter his life, but their love story was doomed before it even began. The woman he was forbidden to love. In the early 1970s, Charles met the woman who would change the course of his life forever, Camilla Shand. She was witty, confident, and full of charm, unlike any of the aristocratic women Charles had been expected to court. The two quickly developed a deep bond, sharing an intellectual connection that went beyond surface-level attraction. But there was a problem. Camilla wasn't seen as a suitable match for the future king. She was not from a noble family of high enough rank, nor was she perceived as the kind of pristine, virginal woman the royal family demanded for an heir to the throne. Despite his feelings, Charles was pressured to break things off with Camilla. She later married Andrew Parker Bowles, a military officer with royal connections, but the love between her and Charles never truly faded. They remained close friends, and their relationship continued behind the scenes in secret. Charles, heartbroken yet loyal to his royal duty, moved on with his life. But the expectations of the monarchy loomed over him. He was expected to marry, and the royal family had already chosen the perfect bride for him, a young woman named Diana Spencer. Their relationship was rushed, orchestrated more as a strategic match than a romantic union. Diana was beautiful, graceful, and beloved by the public. On the outside, she seemed like the ideal princess. But inside, she was walking into a marriage built on deception. From the very start, Charles' heart belonged to another woman. What Diana didn't know was that she would be entering a royal nightmare, one that would eventually lead to heartbreak, scandal, and betrayal on a scale the monarchy had never seen before. Marrying Diana, a royal match or a royal mistake? From the moment Diana Spencer was introduced to the world as Charles's future bride, she was adored. Young, beautiful, and seemingly innocent, she was the perfect fairy tale princess in the eyes of the British public. The press couldn't get enough of her, splashing her face across magazine covers and newspapers, hailing her as the woman who would bring fresh energy into the royal family. But behind the grandeur of their engagement, something was deeply wrong. Charles had proposed to Diana out of duty, not love. The royal family had made it clear that at 32 it was time for him to settle down and produce an heir. Diana checked every box. She was aristocratic, charming, and had no romantic history that could taint the monarchy's image. But there was one glaring problem. Charles was still in love with Camilla. Even before their wedding day, Diana had sensed that something wasn't right. She discovered a bracelet that Charles had commissioned for Camilla, engraved with the initials F and G for their nicknames, Fred and Gladys. Devastated, she confronted him, but Charles brushed off her concerns. His cold response set the tone for what their marriage would become, an arrangement bound by tradition rather than affection. On July 29, 1981, the world watched as Diana walked down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral in a stunning ivory silk gown. Nearly 1 billion people tuned in, mesmerized by the spectacle. To the public, it was the ultimate royal love story. But inside, Diana was already filled with doubt. She later admitted that as she walked toward Charles, she was overwhelmed by a feeling of doom, knowing deep down that she was marrying a man who didn't love her the way she deserved. Their honeymoon only confirmed her worst fears. Charles was distant, preoccupied, and at times outright dismissive. Diana later revealed that he spent much of their time together talking about Camilla, making it painfully clear that she was never far from his thoughts. As she tried to adjust to life as the Princess of Wales, Diana soon realized that she was not just competing with royal duties. She was competing with another woman, and no matter what she did, she was losing. A marriage built on lies. Diana had hoped that after marriage, Charles would truly commit to her, but those hopes quickly faded. The strain between them became evident almost immediately. Diana was thrown into the deep end of royal life, expected to uphold traditions, attend endless engagements, and present a picture-perfect marriage to the world. Yet, behind closed doors, her new life was suffocating. Charles continued to see Camilla in secret, and Diana, feeling increasingly trapped, began to unravel. She battled deep emotional turmoil, feeling isolated, unloved, and powerless against the life she had been thrust into. As her mental health declined, she developed an eating disorder, something she later spoke openly about. She admitted that bulimia became a coping mechanism for the pressure she was under, her only escape from the overwhelming loneliness of her marriage. The public, unaware of the turmoil behind palace doors, continued to idolize Diana. Everywhere she went, crowds gathered, cheering for the woman they saw as their princess. She had a natural warmth, an ability to connect with people in a way that no royal had before. But while the world loved her, her own husband resented her growing popularity. Charles was used to being the center of attention, but now Diana was the true star. Even Queen Elizabeth noticed how the public favored Diana over Charles, creating tension within the royal family. Their relationship grew colder by the day, and soon the affair that had always existed in the background could no longer be hidden. Charles and Camilla were no longer discreet, and Diana, humiliated and heartbroken, decided that if she couldn't have a faithful husband, she would take control of the narrative. It was time for the world to know the truth. Diana's revenge, the tell-all that shook the monarchy. If Charles thought Diana would suffer in silence, he was wrong. She had spent years being the perfect wife, the perfect princess, the perfect face of the monarchy, only to be cast aside. But Diana was no ordinary royal. She was strong-willed, intelligent, and deeply aware of her power over public opinion. If Charles wasn't going to give her the respect she deserved, she would expose his betrayal in the most dramatic way possible. In 1995, Diana sat down for an explosive interview with the BBC's Panorama, an interview that would change the course of royal history. With the cameras rolling, she delivered one of the most famous lines in modern monarchy: "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." In that moment, she shattered the carefully curated illusion of royal perfection. Diana spoke openly about her struggles, her battle with bulimia, her depression, and the loneliness that consumed her as she tried to hold her marriage together. She confirmed what the world had long suspected: Charles had never been faithful. The interview was a devastating blow to the royal family. For centuries, the monarchy had thrived on discretion, on keeping its scandals behind palace doors, but Diana had broken that rule, and the consequences were immediate. The public turned against Charles. He was no longer the dashing prince, but the cheating husband who had betrayed the world's most beloved princess. Queen Elizabeth was left with no choice. She ordered Charles and Diana to divorce. But just as Diana was beginning to reclaim her life, tragedy struck. The tragic death of Princess Diana. On August 31, 1997, the world awoke to devastating news. Princess Diana was dead. The tragic accident occurred in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris, where Diana, her boyfriend Dodi Fayed, and their driver Ari Paul were attempting to escape a relentless pack of paparazzi. The car, speeding through the tunnel, lost control and crashed into a concrete pillar. Dodi and the driver were killed instantly. Diana, though still alive when emergency responders arrived, succumbed to her injuries a few hours later at the hospital. The world was in shock. Millions wept openly in the streets of London, leaving flowers, letters, and candles outside Kensington Palace. Diana had been the people's princess, the woman who had redefined what it meant to be royal. And now, in an instant, she was gone. But while the public grieved, the royal family's silence was deafening. Queen Elizabeth II, known for her unwavering adherence to royal protocol, remained behind closed doors at Balmoral with Prince Charles and their sons, William and Harry. The British public grew furious. They expected a statement, a gesture, something to acknowledge the immense loss they felt. Instead, the royal family seemed distant, indifferent even. It was Charles who ultimately made the decision to bring Diana's body back from Paris, flying to France himself in a rare moment of visible grief. But it wasn't enough to silence the growing anger. Conspiracy theories quickly spread. Some believed Diana's death was no accident. Questions arose about the role of the paparazzi, the failure of emergency services, and even whispers of a more sinister plot involving the royal family. The speculation only intensified when Dodi Fayed's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, publicly claimed that Diana and his son had been murdered. Though official investigations ruled the crash an accident caused by reckless driving and excessive speed, many remained unconvinced. For Charles, Diana's death was more than just a public tragedy. It was a turning point. He had spent years locked in a cold, strained marriage with her, but now in the eyes of the world, she was immortalized as the tragic princess wronged by the monarchy. He, on the other hand, was still the man who had betrayed her, and no amount of time would erase that. The battle for the throne. Should William take over? Even after Diana's passing, Charles struggled to win back the public's favor. Though he continued his royal duties, his image had been permanently tainted. The British people had adored Diana, and her absence left a void that Charles simply could not fill. His relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles remained a contentious issue, with many refusing to accept her as anything more than the woman who had destroyed Diana's marriage. As time went on, whispers began to circulate. Should the throne skip Charles altogether? Many royal watchers believed that when Queen Elizabeth II eventually passed, the crown should bypass Charles and go directly to Prince William. William had inherited his mother's charm and warmth, qualities that Charles had always lacked. He was young, modern, and far more in tune with the public than his father. For Charles, the idea of being sidelined after waiting his entire life to become king was unbearable. He had spent decades preparing for the role, performing royal duties, and representing Britain on the world stage. Yet the public's desire for a younger, more relatable monarch loomed over him. Queen Elizabeth II, ever the traditionalist, made it clear that Charles would be her successor, and no amount of public debate would change that. Still, the monarchy was at a crossroads. The world was changing. The British public had grown increasingly skeptical of the royal family's relevance. Scandals had chipped away at their once unshakable image, and the younger generation was far less attached to the idea of monarchy than their parents had been. If Charles were to take the throne, he would need to prove that he could modernize the institution and restore public faith. But there was one thing standing in his way: his past. The second chance, marrying Camilla. Despite the controversy, Charles remained devoted to Camilla. Their love had endured decades of secrecy, public scrutiny, and royal disapproval. But now, with Diana gone and years of damage control behind them, Charles was ready to make Camilla his wife. In 2005, Charles and Camilla finally married in a low-key civil ceremony, followed by a blessing at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. It was a stark contrast to his first wedding: no grand procession, no royal spectacle. This time it was quiet, almost subdued. Even Queen Elizabeth II refused to attend the civil ceremony, sending a clear message that while she accepted the marriage, she would not fully endorse it. The British public remained divided. Some had softened toward Camilla, seeing her as Charles's true love. Others still viewed her as the woman who had ruined Diana's life. Charles and Camilla worked tirelessly to change that perception. Camilla took on royal duties, supporting charities and embracing a more public role. Slowly, she gained acceptance, but the shadow of Diana never fully disappeared. Even with his marriage to Camilla, Charles' path to the throne remained uncertain. His approval ratings fluctuated, and the idea of William as a more suitable king never completely faded. Meanwhile, the royal family faced new challenges: internal tensions, political shifts, and the growing independence of younger royals. The monarchy, once seen as untouchable, was more vulnerable than ever. And then, in 2022, the moment Charles had spent his entire life waiting for finally arrived. King Charles, a rocky start to the throne. On September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II passed away at the age of 96, marking the end of an era. After waiting over 70 years, Charles was now king, but from the very beginning his reign was met with uncertainty. His coronation, though grand, felt different from previous ones. The world had changed. The British monarchy was no longer the unshakable institution it had once been. Calls for republicanism were louder than ever, and protests erupted across the UK, questioning whether the royal family still had a place in modern society. Charles, now in his 70s, faced a difficult task, keeping the monarchy relevant. Unlike his mother, who had spent a lifetime earning the respect of her people, Charles had decades of baggage to overcome. His approval ratings were mixed. Many respected his dedication to environmental causes, but others saw him as out of touch. His strained relationship with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had further damaged the royal family's image, leading to a divide between those who supported the modern, independent Sussexes and those who remained loyal to the traditional monarchy. Rumors also swirled about Charles's health. Whispers of potential illness, fatigue, and internal power struggles within the royal family left many questioning whether his reign would be long or if he would eventually step aside for William. As Charles settled into his role, one question remained: was he truly fit to lead the monarchy into the future, or was his time running out before it even began? Will King Charles remain on the throne? The British monarchy has survived wars, revolutions, and scandals, but the challenges Charles faces today are unlike anything before. He is a king in an era where blind loyalty to the crown is no longer guaranteed. People question his ability to lead, his past mistakes, and whether he can ever truly escape the shadow of Diana. Some believe that Charles will eventually abdicate, passing the throne to William to secure the monarchy's future. Others think he will hold on as long as possible, determined to fulfill the role he has waited his entire life to claim. But one thing is certain: Charles' reign is not the smooth transition he had hoped for. The monarchy is at a turning point, and the decisions he makes in the coming years will determine whether it thrives or fades into irrelevance. What do you think? Should Charles step down for William, or does he deserve his time on the throne? Let us know in the comments.